Here, I'd like to address a very specific topic, and that is making room for type. For most of the images that I shoot, I'm not planning to put type in my image, but if you're doing photography and composition for like magazines or web pages or any sort of advertisement, very often type is going to be involved. So if that's the case, if that's part of your project, you always want to make sure you leave room in your image for type, and typically you want to use negative space. All right. For instance, here's a photograph, just a simple photograph of the mountains across the Kenai Peninsula over by the Caribou Hills on a ski tour. And so this is the initial image, and if we were going to take this and we wanted to use it on a magazine cover, and we were going to crop this, say for one use, maybe a magazine cover, and for another use, not the magazine cover, then these two images that you see on the right-hand side would represent those two uses. The upper right image, I'm going to crop for just normal use without necessarily putting it on a magazine cover or an ad. And notice that I have cropped out much of the sky and I've increased the contrast. In fact, this photo was actually shot with a polarizing filter. So I don't need room for type in this image. So I crop it down, but notice I leave plenty of breathing room here for the mountain to breathe into. When you do a crop like this, when you're trying to take out some of that really flat negative space, too much of it, a good thing to do, but you don't want to take out too much. Always leave your landscape with a little bit of room to breathe. But in this one, the crop, I left more space, which without the type would be too much sky, but with the type, it's just about right. And again, whenever you're composing, always leave room for your elements in your image to breathe, whether it's type at the top of a mountain range or a person, unless you intend to bleed that completely off the image. So make room for type when you're shooting the image if you know that the project is ultimately going to be used for some commercial purpose. And I just thought I'd show you some other examples, and I also wanted to show you a little bit of an error or a mistake. And here's an image that was shot and used for Mako's water taxi. It says hike to the ice is a cool thing to do, but in this case there's a little bit of an error in this, and I want to show you this error so that it kind of sticks in your head, is whenever you set type, always make sure that that type is totally over the negative space and does not cut across any other portion of the image. Notice on this image here, the Alaska winter is totally over the negative space and doesn't interfere with any other image element at all. Whereas in this image, you'll notice that the It's a Cool Thing to Do kind of overlaps this high contrast area here. Bad idea. There's plenty of room in this image for this type to just be over the negative space, so make sure that you don't get this kind of overlap. Avoid placing type over complex portions of your image. This is fine down here, and most of this is okay, but there really should have been some attention paid here, making sure that type was moved off that edge right there. And then finally, here's a photograph you've seen before, but in this case, we're using it for the Ketchikan Bay Water Trail ad. And notice I'm using the negative space in the sky for the logo for the Ketchikan Bay Water Trail and the state parks logo down here over the negative space created by the water. So just a quick note about making sure that if you know you're going to set type, make sure you leave some negative space and then set the type on top of that negative space.